Welcome students, staff, trustees, and community members to our 2021 Virtual Remembrance Day ceremony. My name is Valerie Ho, and I'm joined here today by Nina White and Sarah Cito.
Before we begin, we would like to thank and acknowledge the First Peoples of the Hunkaminam language group, on whose traditional and unceded territories we teach, live, and learn.
Although we cannot gather in person to pay respect to those who fought for our freedom and safety, during this virtual assembly, we kindly ask that you turn off your devices regardless. We ask that you hold your applause in respect for this somber occasion.
Today we unite together as one to remember those who have fallen, served, or are still serving our country at this very moment. By wearing a poppy, we display our respect and remembrance on this significant day. Our theme for this year is unity. By highlighting the impact of women, Indigenous people, and in the history of Canada, we hope to represent many layers of our country.
Now take a moment to look at the person sitting on your left. Now look at the person sitting on your right. We are all here today as a united generation, as one school, one community, and one country to pay tribute and recognize everyone who has been affected by war.
Whether it be the difference in heritage, beliefs, or customs, we are here together to acknowledge and remember the thousands of women and men who sacrificed their lives for our future.
Today we would like to shed light on those who have been often forgotten, but play such a crucial role in wars to ensure our freedom.
Though women were not allowed to fight on the front lines, they still lived the horrors of war as they served as nurses for injured soldiers. They also worked in farms to maintain the supply chain of food going overseas to feed the war.
Another group that is often overlooked are the Indigenous soldiers. Because of their hunting traditions, they built up great stamina, and many served as trench runners, putting themselves in danger to get messages to their commanders.
To begin our ceremony, we would like you to all stand for the singing of O Canada, performed by our senior concert band and conducted by our grade 12 student Matthew Lee.
Thank you. You may be seated. We would now like to welcome Mr. Gok to share a few words.
We acknowledge and thank the First Peoples of the Hunkaminam language group, on whose traditional and unceded territory we teach, learn, and live. Respected guests, teachers, parents, and students of the R.C. Palmer School community, good morning. As the principal of this school, it is my honorable duty to address the school community for this very important day. November 11th, Remembrance Day, is the day Canadians remember the brave individuals who have served and continue to serve our country during times of war, conflict, and peace. We are also fortunate to be living in this wonderful country. Ours is a diverse, multicultural society born of Indigenous peoples, French and English settlers, and today home to 38 million people on many different languages, cultures, and faiths. Indeed, Canadians are a people with more differences than similarities. Yet Canada is a peaceful nation with a history built on compromise, negotiation, and tolerance. Our country's history is not without darkness, and we have to continue to work on truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. Yet Canada is recognized around the world for demonstrating that humanity can not only coexist, but successfully celebrate cultural, religious, and linguistic differences. As a nation, we can still do better. Living here today, it is easy to forget that the 20th century was the most violent period in human history. More than 2 million Canadians have sacrificed a great deal to allow us to have our freedoms. More than 118,000 young Canadians, men and women from diverse backgrounds, teenagers and kids in their early 20s, most of them much not older than you, have given up their lives serving Canada in the Boer War, World War I, World War II, Korea, and in every United Nations peacekeeping mission the last 60 years. Despite Hollywood's many attempts, war is neither glorious nor heroic. Throughout history, people have risen up against hatred, greed, and discrimination. It is important to realize that war and peace are not things that simply just happen. They are things that we choose. That is why, despite the sadness, regret, and loss, Remembrance Day also holds a sense of optimism. In our Palmer community, my hope is that we continue to show our acceptance and inclusion of diversity and our optimism for a better world for all. Look around us. Our community is filled with people from different walks of life. This did not exist a generation ago, and I'm heartened and humble when I look around our community and see such diversity. It is truly our differences that make us beautiful, resilient, and united. Unfortunately, we are 2 decades into the 21st century, and human intolerance, mistrust, angry rhetoric, and polarization make our world very fragile. The ongoing pandemic, the global climate crisis have only heightened tensions and widened the gap between rich and poor nations. The threat of an ongoing armed conflict and civil wars with the potential of large worldwide implications remain very real. Remembrance Day is a very important holiday in Canada. It is a time for us Canadians to pause and reflect. Canadians are invited to wear a poppy to remember the great sacrifices made by our young Canadians before us and those who are currently serving our country. A small symbol of reflection and gratitude. Remembrance Day is also a time for hope, a time for tolerance, respect, and understanding. A time to pray, whatever your faith, for the restoration of peace to people of all nations, and a time for global cooperation, and a time for unity. Lest we forget.
Thank you. We would now like to invite Matthew Lee and Jasmine Wren, presidents of the Student Council, to share a few words on behalf of our students.
On November 11, 1918, World War I ended. Since then, Canada has pledged each year to bring together the citizens to honor the brave men and women who have fought courageously in the war, fought for our freedoms and the freedoms of others. Unity has played a large part in the victorious endeavors of Canadians. Whether it is on the battlefield or the efforts made back at home, we have worked to persevere through these hardships together. Through gunfires, trenches, and undesirable conditions, millions of men fought day and night without end.
Through demanding circumstances and difficult living conditions, women courageously took on new roles as frontline workers and businesses. Though family and friends were physically apart, their efforts towards restoration were evident. Togetherness is how we stand to this day, as we continue to remember the members of the Canadian Forces who have sacrificed everything to defend the values of our peace, democracy, freedom, and unity. We acknowledge those who continue to serve in times of conflict and hardship, and in times of peace, and thank the soldiers who have served for those that they have never even met. We thank you, and we will never forget.
We would like now to include a clip of our veteran, Mr. Matthew McBride, a member of the Royal Canadian Legion and the Army, Navy, and Air Force veterans in Canada.
Good morning to all of my friends, students, and faculty here at RC Palmer. It's a pleasure once again to be appearing before you, even though unfortunately the circumstances don't allow me to be here in person. Fingers crossed next year won't be the same. Remembrance Day is a time of year when we pause and reflect on the Canadians, the 110,000 of them who have lost their lives in the service of our country. One of them was a young fellow named David Edgar Brown, who at the age of 19 found himself on a Canadian destroyer in the Atlantic Ocean that was attacked by a German U-boat in 1944 and ultimately sunk. And Mr. Brown found the time while the vessel was sinking to crawl to the stern of the ship and defuse all of the depth charges that, had they not been defused, would have blown up and killed all of the sailors in the water. In doing so, he lost his life in the process, but saved many, many others. Mr. Brown was a 19-year-old graduate of Richmond Secondary School here in Richmond. A year later, another young person from Richmond Secondary School wrote a poem, and I'd like to read the last line to you about that. The poem reads at its very end, "These three I knew, and others just like them, boys every one. They were not quite men except in courage. They sit here still, so now I, who have done nothing, try to make others understand that for their sake, three mouths are filled with sand." It was written by grade 12 student Ruth McWilliam in Richmond Secondary School. The notion that Remembrance Day is all about old men and old women is a fallacy. Remembrance Day is actually about young people exactly your age.
Thank you. We all come from various religions, cultural backgrounds, and gender orientations, but we unite as one to remember. We would now like to introduce Ms. Van Kralgen, Valerie Ho, Ivy Chin, Ria Pat, Shifa Hassan, Cassie Choi, and Iris Chan, who will give a reading of In Flanders Fields in their respective languages: French, Spanish, Mandarin, Gujarati, Urdu, Japanese, and English. This traditional and memorable hymn had been written by Lieutenant Colonel McRae in 1915 during the First World War.
Au champ d'honneur, les coquelicots sont parsemés de l'eau en l'eau, auprès des croix.
Sobre cruz que marca. Alondras volando haciendo canto. Apenas oídas sobre el caño abajo.
我们刚刚阵亡牺牲，就在几天前，我们还活着，感受拂晓，目睹夕阳。
मोहब्बत किया और महबूब हुए पर अब खामोश पड़े हैं फ्लैंडर्स फील्ड्स में.
शत्रु साथे અમારો ઝઘડો ઉઠાવો, નિષ્ફળ હાથથી અમે તમારા તરફ ફેંકીએ છીએ.
当時、それを高く保つためにあなたのものになりなさい。もし、あなた方が死ぬ私たちの信仰を破るなら。
We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
This rich heritage has been recognized in many ways. The names given to several Royal Canadian Navy warships over the years, like HMCS Iroquois, Cayuga, and Huron, are just one indication of our country's lasting respect for the contributions of Indigenous veterans. This long tradition of military service is also commemorated with the striking National Aboriginal Veterans Monument in Ottawa. This deeply symbolic memorial features a large bronze eagle at its top, with 4 men and women from different Indigenous groups from across Canada immediately below. A wolf, bear, bison, and caribou, powerful animals that represent spiritual guides, which have been long seen by Indigenous cultures as important to military success, look out from each corner. Remembrance ceremonies are held at this special monument, including on Indigenous Veterans Day, which is observed each year on November 8th.
Thank you. We would now like to invite Palmer's Choir to perform the Kentuckian, written by the Eastern Orthodox Memorial Liturgy with music by Rupert G. Lang.
Thank you to our choir. We light the candles to celebrate our freedom, to ignite the flame in memory of our soldiers, a memory that will live on and burn bright.
The candle amidst the darkness reminds us to never forget, to always be grateful for the opportunities and life we have today, thanks to those who endured more than we could ever imagine.
Use this time to reflect upon what you have heard at this Remembrance Day assembly.
Think about the importance of today and how fortunate we are to be here. Please take a moment to appreciate what has been given to all of us. Lucian in grade 11 will be playing the last post in the Cheve. Now please stand for a moment of silence.
You may now be seated. On Remembrance Day, we remember the innocent victims of war and the horrors and atrocities that abound in the wake of conflict. We are deeply fortunate to be a part of the intricate tapestry of Canada, but must remain mindful that war still affects the fabric of our society. The Drama Club would like to illustrate that everyone is a victim of war with the following animation, directed by Angela Lee in grade 12.
Remembrance Day is a day to remember our fallen soldiers, veterans, and the endless sacrifices they made for us to have peace. Today we focus on unity, the brotherhood between those that fought in the war, the nurses, and the determined efforts from women and others on the home front.
As soldiers get on the trains and say their goodbyes to loved ones, all are focused on a single purpose, to fight for their own country. For countless soldiers, it would be their last goodbye, and for the rest, they would return home broken.
But as we remember them, we also thank their collaborative efforts for giving us the harmonious world we have today.
Despite the challenges, a brotherhood formed between the soldiers. Relentless, they worked alongside each other and our allies. United as one, they used every last inch of strength to fight back.
Of the over 600,000 Canadian soldiers that fought in World War I, 60,000 would pay the ultimate sacrifice. And as hundreds of soldiers fell on the battlefield each day, their comrades would attempt to carry them to makeshift hospitals, unwilling to leave them for dead.
Our nurses, mostly women, tended to the wounded throughout the Great War, despite having to risk their own lives. A total of 2,845 nursing sisters worked in the Canadian Army Medical Corps. Caring for a flood of soldiers, they saved thousands of lives and played a pivotal role in the war.
Back at home, remaining workers rushed to fill in the jobs soldiers left behind, and women were among the majority of those workers. They worked in positions considered traditionally for men, like those in factories. These women, although they did not fight the enemy directly, made sure that life at home was running smoothly, kept morale up, and produced much of the weapons and resources Canadian troops used in battle.
The unity and sheer determination of every single individual aided in the war effort, whether it was on the front lines or the home front. This is best put by our allies. Every man, woman, and child is in action and will be privileged to remain in action throughout this war.
It is with the deepest gratitude that we thank and remember our Canadian soldiers and veterans. From our allies to our soldiers and nurses, to the women that worked to fill in the jobs back at home, we defended and fought on all fronts. Today, on Remembrance Day, we pause to thank, we pause to recognize, and we pause to remember.
This concludes our Remembrance Day Assembly. We again would like to thank our principal, Mr. Gog, staff, and students for being here today.
Thank you, Ms. Chan, the choir, and the concert band for their accompanying performances, and Ms. Van Kralgen's leadership class for their preparation and hard work to put this ceremony together.
We would also like to thank Ms. Comet and the Drama Club for their moving performance. Thank you to Mr. Matthew McBride for being a pivotal member of our Palmer community.
Remembrance Day is a day where we commemorate the peace we have in this country today and honor those who have helped achieve that peace. We hope you all leave today feeling more connected with one another and with our community as a whole. Thank you for your participation and respect.